it's then up for council to decide whether or not they accept that.
If it helps, Chair, I would make the point that the plan prior to submission to the inspectorate has to go through council. That won't happen until after the second round of Reg 19 consultation has been completed, which will be beyond 6 months. So,
And quite precisely, there'll be 15 people there. Yeah.
so that might be, if the members are minded to revisit this, that might be a better time and place to do it at that stage when you don't have this encumbrance of the Constitution.
As we have done before.
Councillor Jess Bailey, then Councillor Young.
I mean, if we want to do, if the exact location is being, if delegated, we could just draw a tiny, tiny bit around like the smallest little section adjacent to the area 04 and 05, not even maybe going to the west of the Exmouth Road. But I think that I think we can't get too tied up in the revoking decisions. I mean, we're not approving the final version of the plan as in, you know, to be adopted. We're not at a full council meeting. So I think I also agree with Councillor Ledger. Thank you.
I must say I would like to agree with Councillor Ledger, but unfortunately, as the chair, I have to take advice from Mr. Hunter. And if that advice differs from Councillor Ledger's, I'm afraid Mr. Hunter's supersedes it. Everybody's got their hand up. Councillor Young, then Councillor Howe. Can you dig us out of this hole, please?
I read it to be that. Yeah, I read it to be up to Exmouth Road and not onto the other side and up a side road by 100 metres. But the other point is that this is going out for consultation, and we'll be recommending alterations to the whole document following the consultation anyway. So we could no. It's not what a Reg 19 consultation's for. I take it back then.
My turn.
Go on, Councillor.
Right. The worst thing we could possibly do now, as we stand today, is give a nut, a massive sledgehammer to crack a tiny nut. And that's what we'd be doing if we tried changing this boundary today. Because then one of the other allocation sites where we've got residents up in arms about their allocations would quite rightly say, you've made a wrong decision. Your local plan isn't sound to even go to a planning inspectorate because you have abused the powers we have. That is the fundamental issue we have. We cannot change it now. We can change it when it comes back to full council for its final reading, as we have done before. So yes, we can, but we cannot legally change it now without the possibility of throwing the whole local plan out and really messing up everything completely. And that is the worst and the sincerest way I can put this. We have to follow the law, and we cannot do anything but.
I mean, technically, it's standing orders rather than the law.
It's
but
the same thing, actually.
Councillor Bailey.
But then how can we change our decision about an allocation for Budley? Decided to allocate 50 houses, and we've changed that today.
I think the distinction there is that officers have come back with further information that changes the circumstances. Whereas I don't.
That's a far bigger deal than changing a boundary, because we're not even changing an allocation.
Members, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the chair's outlined what the constitution says with regards to this. You're wanting to change a decision that you've made less than a month ago, and you're not in a position to do that at the moment. So I don't think there's anything more to be said about it.
Well, then we have to revoke our decision on Budley, because we can't.
Okay, so for the benefit of those at home, while we try and resolve this issue and what the appropriate way forward, if any, is, we're going to take what time is it? It's 14:30. We're going to take a 5-minute recess just to resolve this issue, and then we'll be back with you. Okay, thank you for your patience, members, while we sought some advice on how we move forward with this. Mr. Hunter has consulted with colleagues and is going to share the content of his advice with us, and then it will be down to members to decide where to go from there.
Thank you, Chair. I've just had a quick chat to the Democratic Services Manager, who agrees with my interpretation and suggested way forward. As we said, in relation to paragraph 13, previous decisions, motion or amendment to rescind decision meeting at the council, which he agrees also would apply to this committee within the past 6 months, cannot be moved unless a notice of motion is signed by at least 15 members. So obviously we haven't got that to be able to do that. So what you're suggesting to be able to get around that situation is to suspend the actual rules of procedure. And again, then if you go to Article 15 of the Constitution, it does say a motion to suspend any rules will not be moved without notice unless at least 1/2 of the whole number of councillors entitled to attend the meeting in question is present. Now, I believe that there are more than half the members of this committee present, so it is possible for you to suspend the Constitution, and it says the extent and duration of this suspension will be proportionate to the result to be achieved, taking account of the purposes of the Constitution as set out in Article 1. So it is possible for you to do that, but again, Democratic Services Manager agrees with me that it's quite dubious behaviour to do so in relation to a decision that you've taken less than 1 month ago, that now, because it suits your purposes, you're saying you don't want to rely upon the Constitution anymore, which has been agreed by full council and put in place for your guidance, and it doesn't suit you today to want to do that. So maybe at the next meeting you might decide that you don't want to follow the Constitution again, and you might wish to suspend the Constitution and never follow the Constitution, and I just want you to have a think about how that looks to the members of the public and whether that may be perceived as being quite appalling behaviour. But I'll leave that with you now to decide which you want to go forward. Thank you.
Members, so if you want to move a motion to amend the Newton Poppleford settlement boundary today, then the standing orders need to be suspended. Does anybody wish to so move? Councillor Jess Bailey, do you wish to speak?
I do. I think I hear what our advice is, but I so strongly feel that including that extra area is not the right thing to do. That other people may not feel the same way, but I think it's a really important decision about road safety. So for me, yeah, I would be prepared to, so that we can get the right decision. And actually, we're not even really making a decision. We're making a recommendation, and we're not at a full council. And I'm just not. I feel so concerned about the boundary that I would make that proposal. Thank you.
Okay, the proposal has been made. Does anybody wish to second the proposal to suspend whichever standing order it was?
It's the Constitution you suspend.
Yeah.
Okay.
The entire Constitution.
Does it, Councillor Ledger, you wish to second the proposal to suspend the rules of procedure?
Yes, please, Chair. I don't think we're going to descend into absolute anarchy if we're going to do it this once just to get the right outcomes. And I think that's the crux of this. It's not that we're doing it for some underhanded reasons or we're trying to shoehorn something through. I think everyone in the room's identified that there is a mistake that's been made, and we wish to rectify that at this meeting.
Not sure I necessarily agree. Okay, so that has been seconded. We then open the floor if anybody wishes to speak on that proposal. Councillor Ingham.
Thank you, Chair. I do believe we can take that decision, but if we do that sort of decision, I think it should be because we've made a profound error, not a decision that we regret. Yes, and I think there's a difference there. I don't think this is a profound error that we need to put right on the scale. So I wouldn't be supporting it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. Councillor Howe.
Yeah, I'm going to speak against this motion, not because I think the boundary is correct in its current form. I think it is wrong, like others, but I believe the correct way to do it is when this paper comes back to full council. And that's when it can be changed without amending the constitution or suspending the constitution. And it is the correct and proper way of doing it, not an ad hoc way that leaves us open to no end of sort of accusation of you don't like it, so you just suspend your rules.
Mike didn't make a proposal, but thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Young.
I tend to agree with Councillor Howe on this one. I can see the sense of changing it. It makes perfect sense. But at the time, we made a decision. Now we go back on it. I think we need to stick to that decision, and we can change it later on. We recognise that it's a mistake, and it will be changed, but not today.
Just to be clear, even if we do suspend the standing orders, it's not guaranteed that the boundary will change. I'd remind members that actually Strategic Planning Committee voted for this boundary on the 22nd of November. This didn't come out of nowhere. Do any other members wish to speak on this point? Okay. In which case then we go to a vote on the motion to suspend the rules of procedure. I can't believe this is happening to me. All those in favour, please. I see 2 hands in favour of that motion. All those against, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those abstaining, please. That's just me. So that proposal fails, I'm afraid, folks, which means a motion to redraw the boundary can't be made at this time. I think I'm right in saying, therefore. So do we just move on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. In which case then we come to the remainder of the agenda and we come to Chapter 6, Mitigating Climate Change, a slight change of topic. Members, are there any comments on this chapter? Councillor Fernley.
Thank you. I would just like a comment from Ed, just to say why we haven't gone to say we have solar panels on the roofs of all the houses. I think I can remember correctly, but I keep being asked it by residents, and I would like this down on the tape for record, please.
So the issue there was the impact on viability of us stipulating that solar panels had to be on there, where there are other measures that we could stipulate instead that would have a greater carbon impact in terms of embodied carbon in construction. Is that right? And we've also got a policy in there that says they all have to be PV ready as well.
Yes, that's right. So we went down the PV ready route on advice from SWEG about how to kind of get the best outcomes under the Future Home Standard that's currently being rolled out through building regulations. The fear was if we required solar panels on every roof, there's the cost implications that the chair refers to, but also the likelihood that developers would do that in lieu of other things that they could be doing to score the points that they need under the assessment system. By requiring properties to be solar panel ready, we get all of those points through those other things that they would need to do to make it up. Plus, we're making it hopefully so attractive to residents to put solar panels on the roofs because the cost would be minimal compared to what it would otherwise be, that hopefully we will get a high uptake of solar panels on the roofs on top of the other benefits that would be delivered through the requirements of building regulations.
Thank you. It's because Broadcliff Neighbourhood Plan requires all new build or houses to have solar panels on them. So I just wanted to have the clarification. Thank you, Chair.
I think the point is there that neighbourhood plans can get away with a bit more than we necessarily could. Councillor Ingham.
Yes, Chair. I'm concerned that we're putting climate change into this convenient package then we tie a bow on it and say, well, that's done with, so we can crack on with everything else now. And I'm not really sure future generations will believe we've tackled this coherently within this plan. This is the first, in my memory, opportunity to really grasp climate change within a local plan. And we're doing it superficially. For example, we're scared developers might not like some of our ideas, so we're tempering them. I'm not sure that's how you address climate change.
I think perhaps then we'd be asking for a change in the law so that we didn't have to worry about viability, though I've got some sympathy with that position, Ben, quite a lot of sympathy, in fact. But there we go. I'm not sure there's anything else to say on that, Mr. Freeman.
Oh, well, the only thing I'd add is I think what we've tried to do is get the best outcomes within the legislation and the system that we work within. We're in this system whereby building regulations is the primary means of securing higher build quality in terms of reducing carbon footprints, and that's what the government are directing us to use. What we've tried to do through the policy is add an extra layer to that to get as close to zero carbon as we possibly can, and it should be pretty damn close to zero carbon. But I mean, in terms of addressing climate change as a whole, I completely agree with Councillor Ingham. This is a drop in the ocean. These new houses that we'll be building through this plan amount to about 1% addition to the housing stock every year. There's lots more we need to be doing outside of the local plan to address climate change.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Any further comments on this chapter? No, okay. We come then to Chapter 7, Adapting to Climate Change. Are there any comments on Chapter 7? I can give you page numbers, but they will be page numbers within the appendix rather than the full agenda pack. Within Appendix 1, we're on page 100. But if you're in the full agenda pack, that will not be. Okay, so Chapter 7 then, Adapting to Climate Change. Are there any comments on this chapter? Okay, then we come to Chapter 8, Meeting Housing Needs, which contains the policy on affordable housing, which we were discussing a little bit earlier. Are there any comments on the content of this chapter? Councillor Ingham.
I still think it's highly relevant that we formulate a policy for affordable housing delivery that achieves our aims and is an improvement on current attitude. You know, build as many houses as you can and hope some of them are affordable. And if the developer refuses to meet that target and comes up with some excuse that they can't afford it, then we'll go along with it. I think we should be far harder on any large developments regarding that. So if you don't meet our policies, you don't build. You know, and I'm sure suddenly or within a few months they'll adapt to meet our needs. And I don't think our targets are hard enough. Said before, you know, about the percentage level, also with regard to the height of buildings. You know, if you want to supply a high number of affordable homes, not necessarily dwellings, but homes that can be flats, then there's no end to it. Just like Exeter have failed to address that for the last 30 years, haven't they? There's no need for us to because they do things incorrectly, for us to follow that same strategy. I do think we could be a lot tougher on our requirement for affordable housing and that mixed tenure, as others were saying. You know, it does work.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ingham. Do you have any specific suggestions to make?
Well, you could. I have made them before. You know, for example, having tested the ground, I was told that 70% mixed tenure is possible. You could never go higher than that because you make the settlement unattractive. You have to have at least that 30% of, you know, open value. But one of the other ones, which I know that Exeter have done correctly, not that it was their idea, is that, for example, if you want to increase the number of council-owned properties, you could say if you've got 25% affordable housing requirement, you can say, right, well, if you build, say, 12% and sell them to the local authority for £1, that's acceptable. So we actually improve our own housing stock and thereby our control of affordable housing. There's quite a few things that we haven't considered, although we have knowledge of it.
Councillor Ledger?
So two things. I think I know the answer to the first one, but why are we suggesting a lower percentage of affordable housing within Axminster compared to the rest
Councillor
of the
Ledger
district?
didn't come to the 22nd
I didn't,
meeting.
no.
Ms Freeman, could you catch Councillor Ledger up, please?
So this arises from the viability work that's been done on the plan that shows that development values in Axminster are lower than much of the rest of the district, such that it's not viable to deliver the 35% of affordable housing that we're proposing to deliver elsewhere, and hence the lower figure in Axminster. So it simply comes down to economics and viability of development.
Okay. And then the second suggestion is we haven't included any. We've talked about a lot of different tenures, but we haven't spoke specifically about housing need in regards to bedrooms and then those within developments. One of the main thrusts, I think, when at the inception of this plan was we've got a huge housing need for one and very small number of bedrooms and very high number of bedrooms, and we haven't really addressed that throughout the plan. I know that's probably been talked about at a previous meeting that wasn't at either.
Mr Freeman, would you like to catch Councillor Ledger up again?
Yes, so we did have a policy in the plan at one point, which was seeking higher proportions of 1 and 2 bedroom homes, which I think was based on discussions we'd had with members previously on this perception that that was the need in the district. The issue we've had is that the evidence in the local housing needs assessment actually shows that the need is for 75%, I think it was, of all new homes to be 3 or 4 bedroom homes, based on the evidence that's been produced. And so I think we reached a position at a previous meeting where it was deemed better to have a policy that simply refers to getting an appropriate mix of housing based on local needs evidence at that point in time that an application's coming forward, so that if through neighbourhood plans or through other housing needs assessments we have more locally specific housing needs evidence, and that can inform those applications coming forward and hopefully inform the housing mix that's coming forward on sites in that locality, which might then provide evidence to reaffirm what I think we all feel is that the need should be for smaller properties than what we're currently seeing. But as things stand, the evidence shows the contrary, and that the need is for more 3 and 4 bedroom units. And that's partly because the local housing needs assessment obviously doesn't just look at local needs, it's looking at the needs of those moving into the area from outside who might be in a better position to afford the larger properties that are available. So this is about the plan needing to follow the evidence. But through that previous discussion, I think we reached a good middle ground whereby the policy allows for consideration of other housing needs evidence that might come forward that might reaffirm our views in terms of the smaller houses.
Councillor Ingham?
Chair, but this is based on what Ed's just said. I disagree with that evidence which I was referring to before. You know, how many people buy houses that have gone onto our register? Well, obviously none. But is the housing register, does that record the number of new home owners throughout East Devon? Of course it doesn't. So you're looking at a very specific number of people, and you're saying that is the restriction of housing need. It isn't. That's the possible registration for housing allocation through the control of East Devon, which is a section of the complete need. And therefore you've ignored the rest of the distribution. You've looked at a skewed distribution, in my opinion.
The data I was referring to in the local housing needs assessment is the report from ORS, and I think you had a presentation at some point on that piece of work, which was looking more at sort of demographic change and the needs of the local population and those moving in, but not just those in affordable housing need, which I think is the Devon Home Choice register and data that you're referring to there, Councillor Ingham. That's not the data that's informed that, but the way we've worded the policy does leave it open for that to be used as part of the local evidence of housing need that could inform the housing mix on a given site. So it's more open in terms of using those sources of evidence, I think, than it was previously, and also in terms of tapping into local housing needs assessments that might be produced by neighbourhood planning groups or through other work that we might do in the future. So hopefully we can gather that evidence and help to have that evidence to inform the housing mix in the particular localities. But at the moment, all we've got is a district-wide evidence, and we need to follow that evidence, even if it's counterintuitive to what we think is actually needed.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Any further comments, suggestions for this chapter? Councillor Collins?
Where do houses of multiple occupation fit into our policies? Thank you.
Yes, apologies, I'm just scrolling through to the relevant policy, which I believe is HN08 on page, starts on the bottom of page 121 in the document, and talks about the conversion of existing homes and buildings and other uses to shared accommodation, including hostels and houses of multiple occupation, and then sets a criteria-based policy for those, which includes protecting the privacy of existing homes and gardens of neighbouring properties, ensuring there's good vehicular access and car parking arrangements, servicing provision, and looks at the living standards and communal facilities in such accommodation. So hopefully that policy covers all of the requirements for that type of accommodation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Anything further on this chapter? Okay, in which case we come then to chapter 9, supporting the economy and town centre. Are there any comments on this chapter, please? Councillor Jess Bailey.
Oh, I think this is chapter 9. It's about local shops and services. Policy SE08.
It is indeed chapter 9.
So it's the second part of that policy I'd like to comment on. And I think if you look at that policy compared with what's in our current local plan, this one's actually worse. It's not as strong. It's a very long sentence and doesn't entirely make sense. And I think that we've got more robust policy in our current local plan about the viability statement. And our current local plan also has a more positive statement about the maintaining existing local shops and services. So I don't know why we're changing it just for the sake of changing it, and actually I think making it worse. So our policy EN, I think it's EN 14, is better. So why would we make it worse?
Mr. Freeman is just getting that policy wording up.
Thank you.
Did you say EN 14?
Oh, sorry,
Jess?
E14. Sorry, not EN 14.
EN 14 is control of pollution.
So, for instance, in our current local plan, we say where the existing provision of a use of this nature is no longer viable and there's no market for the business as a going concern, evidence will need to be presented to show the site has been actively marketed for at least 12 months at a sound, realistic and viable price for the type of commercial uses and the type of use can command. A vigorous economic assessment will be undertaken to establish the potential and viability of any specific concern. Marketing of any property or business will need to be included, to include offering to the local community for their acquisition and operation. And there's nothing. Yes, there's reference to a viability statement, but it's nothing like as robust. And also, the existing policy makes the statement: existing retail and service provision within villages should be maintained, and potential providers will be encouraged to make provision of a scale and nature appropriate to local needs. And if you look at our wording now, it's not great, and it doesn't really make sense, and it's not as good. So I don't know why we're changing it.
So I think where we got to with this, and there's another policy I think that talks about marketing of premises, might be about the loss of employment land, where we've got guidance on the website about how that sort of marketing exercise should be carried out in terms of ensuring that the property is marketed at a realistic value, marketed in an appropriate way. And he gets into quite a lot of detail about the marketing exercise that needs to go through. And I think the previous policy is sort of a halfway house in that it goes part way into explaining that, and then we're relying on people seeing the guidance on the website to understand the full extent of that. I think the intention here was to strip that out so that we weren't sort of being seen to kind of slightly contradict ourselves between what's in the policy and what's in the guidance, and just leave the details of the marketing to the guidance note, which I think is already on the website and will probably be updated to link to this policy and others in the plan. Whether that's sufficiently clear in the wording as drafted at the moment, I'm just looking at the explanatory text. It does talk about proposals must provide evidence of non-viability through marketing information and viability studies. In hindsight, it should probably refer to, in fact, I said it twice, the council will seek marketing and financial information to demonstrate this. It should probably refer to in accordance with guidance on our website at the very least. But I think there is an issue in terms of going into too much detail in the policy and how much we leave to the guidance. I think the guidance note is 2 or 3 pages of guidance about how to market a property under these proposals. So I think that detail is better left to guidance. I think perhaps what's missing is the link across from the policy to that guidance, rather than trying to encompass that guidance into the policy itself. But
Yeah, I just think that coming from a village where the shop has been under threat, and if I would feel much more confident resisting proposals that erode the service, relying on our current local plan than this, even if we've got some kind of guidance somewhere else. There's nothing in here. There's no, okay, yes, we set out as well in our justification or whatever it's called, but there's nothing in here that says we must try and keep in the actual policy that we're going to resist these proposals to get rid of our shops or anything that's going to get rid of our shops. It's not as robust, and I'm always very wary about, oh, well, it says it somewhere else, because developers, they'll try and just say, well, no, if somebody's going to challenge you, appeal, it's no good us saying, oh, well, we've got some guidance on our website, because they'll be looking at what exactly is the wording of our policy. And I don't feel confident that this puts us in a very strong position, and I would prefer, if we've got stronger wording in our existing plan, yes, fine, supplement that with guidance elsewhere, but don't water this down unnecessarily and rely on something somewhere else. So I would be proposing that this needs to be significantly beefed up to protect our shops, and it's not just West Hill, I'm sure there's lots of other shops. And I just don't like it, because before we talked in our policy about things like, I'm sure we did, things like post offices, and it just doesn't, there's no positive statement in our actual policy about our services and shops, and we just really, really need to protect what we've got and not have a poor policy that can be just circumvented at the whim of a developer, which is what I fear this could be.
I'd be interested to hear what other members think on this point. I kind of understand where you're coming from, Jess, and I certainly agree with the sentiment. But I mean, to me, the first 3 lines of that second section there, development proposals that rather than the would result in the loss of existing local shops and services will be resisted, where it would result in the significant or absolute loss of that facility to the community. I think it should perhaps be in the erosion of or significant absolute loss of. But aside from that, that feels pretty robust to me.
But I think in that policy there should be a statement that says, like we have at the moment, existing retail and service provision within villages should be maintained. I mean, that's the starting point, isn't it? A positive statement that we want to keep those services and facilities, and then go on to say, yes, any reduction or erosion or loss should be opposed. But there should be a starting point that we want to keep them, a positive statement. And I also just think, just saying a viability statement, I can just imagine the kind of things that are going to be produced.
So can I suggest then that if this is the wording in the current local plan, policy E14, regarding change of use of village shops or services, if I suggest then that, as Mr. Freeman has suggested, we add in explicit reference to the wider guidance about viability studies, and we take that first sentence verbatim and plonk it at the start of the second section in policy SE08. Are you happy with that, Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, much happier. And I think as well, it's good to have, in our current one, we refer to shops, post offices, public houses, or other services to the community. And I think that's important to have those things, because post offices and public, we know probably what they mean, but if you feel like your post office or public house is under threat, I think it's important that that's actually spelt out, just like it is in our current policy.
Okay, we can certainly plonk in and name drop a few examples of community services. That's fine. Councillor Howe?
Not really for what you're thinking. I just need to make the declaration, I'm a village shop owner. So I don't believe I have an interest in this. If you get me, even though I own a shop, I don't think it affects me. So having spoken to Damien, but I just need to make the point.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Howe. So we got those couple of comments from Councillor Bailey on board. Thank you, Jess. Councillor Young, new point?
No,
Are you just saying you agree with Jess?
I agree with Jess.
Okay, thank you very much. We can move on then.
Yeah, especially if it includes pubs.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments on anything in chapter 9 then, please? Councillor Faithful.
I'm just looking at SEO2, and it says about intensification and extension of existing employment in the countryside. What is there for new sites in the countryside?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Freeman, but other than the policy allocations that we've set out, I don't think we're encouraging new employment development in the open countryside, are we? Because that would be unsustainable.
Not new build, no, other than as farm diversification schemes, which the following policy, SEO3, I think allows some limited new build as part of farm diversification. as a whole, we're not seeking to promote new build employment uses in the countryside. So SE02 relates to the extension of existing employment businesses, I should point out, and not business parks, and the conversion of existing rural buildings as well.
I'm still on.
Councillor-
Well, how does OTRI 20 work?
So OTRI 20 is a policy allocation. So that's a different can of worms, if you like. We've made a policy allocation for employment development in a specific village. Policy SEO2, in the absence of a policy saying you can build new employment any way you like, are relevant beyond policy allocations because they're about development management decisions in the absence of a policy allocation.
Yes, many of our allocations are currently countryside. We're taking them out of the countryside to allocate them so that they can come forward for development, which fundamentally changes the policy position.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillor Fernley.
Thank you. Just a bit of clarification on SEO2. It says existing operational site boundaries of a business for intensification or the extension of that business. When you say intensification, if we're in the countryside, we're talking about farming, presumably. So are we really wanting to encourage more intensive farming, which is at odds with climate change and trying to improve our soils and reduce flooding? I'm just trying to work out what the actual word intensification means in this policy.
Through you, Chair, I don't really see this policy as relating to agricultural businesses so much as other businesses that are located in the countryside. We have a separate policy on sort of farm diversification, which is SEO3. And obviously many agricultural developments are permitted developments in any event. So SEO2 would mainly be where you've got existing businesses that may have been in the countryside for many years, and within their existing site boundaries, they can potentially intensify the use, extend existing buildings or other activities, as long as it's within the existing site boundaries. It's the intention there.
How would a farming business know that that wasn't them and that we're not trying to encourage them to intensify their businesses?
So I didn't catch the start of that, could you?
How would a farming business looking at this policy, wanting to intensify its farming, be able to work out that that's not meant for them?
We could clarify that in the wording. I think the wording refers to extension of existing employment businesses in the countryside. I guess farms may see themselves as employment businesses, whereas the next one refers specifically to farms. Of course, the added complication to all of this is that obviously you might have a business that's based in a converted building in a farmyard that's not part of the farm. But I'm happy to take away an action and look at how we can more clearly differentiate between which policies relate to farms as opposed to which relate to existing employment businesses in the countryside.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fernley. Councillor Young, a new point?
Yeah, policy SE02, employment development in the countryside. This goes back to an argument I had 10 years ago with the previous local plan, and we did put some provisos at the base of that policy. I wonder where we were going with this one.
Are you making a suggestion there, Councillor Young?
When does a business park become too big? Is the question I've got here. We had it covered in the villages policy. This is going to be replacing the villages policy.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, this is the distinction between the expansion of an existing rural business as opposed to a business park.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just reading it again because I thought the distinction was clear somewhere, that we were talking about specific businesses rather than business parks. But I'm struggling to see where it makes that distinction. But I believe that was the intention, was that it didn't relate to the expansion of business parks. I don't know if Mr. Dickens can. Yes, he's nodding. I'm sure that was the intention, that we didn't change our approach in terms of that this was for the expansion of rural businesses themselves rather than business parks. So we can look at that at the same time and how we can make that clear.
I'm fearful of some business owners having great expansionist ideas, and they have a justification that they want to expand, and it would be a massive big factory. Now they might be a specialist car builder, and they want to go into car building in a bigger way, and if they've got a justification, therefore we would then allow it.
I think we've heard that wasn't the intent of the policy, so we can go away and clarify that wording and pick up that point. Any other comments on further issues? I have already come out, but Councillor Faithful, I will indulge you.
SE04, resisting loss of employment sites. Is there anything that we can do to properly implement that? Because we've had all these wonderful policies in neighbourhood plans as well, and then it goes to planning committee and it just goes straight through, change of like shops or whatever into housing, and we lost it straight away without, there seems, I don't know what there is to, what we can do to secure that policy in a more, I don't know, robust, I don't know, maybe because it just seems to be, planning committee seem to ignore it.
Planning committee ignore lots of things. Mr. Freeman, any thoughts?
Far be it for me to jump to the defence of planning committee, but obviously their task is a difficult one, and is to balance up the relevant planning merits of an individual case, which in some circumstances, particularly at a time when we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, might lead to the balance being tilted in favour of a residential development over retaining an existing employment site. So it's difficult without looking at specific cases to understand the concern that's been raised, but I think the policy there is a robust policy. It's then for us as a council and through the relevant committees to defend that policy or depart from policy where it's deemed appropriate. But there is always that risk with any policy that other considerations will outweigh them and lead to a departure from that policy.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillor Howe.
I wasn't going to jump to the defence of the planning committee, but I was going to point out, as Mr. Freeman has, we've had appeal decisions go against us on this. It is hard to maintain that momentum when the appeal inspector says the opposite.
Councillor Jess Bailey, briefly.
Briefly, HN06 policy 118 needs tidying up, please, because so you've got
HN06?
yeah.
That's
Oh.
chapter 8.
Are we
Jess.
not in that chapter?
It's okay. Go on.
Page 118. I think it needs tidying up. So you've got the first section which talks about subdivision, presumably anywhere. Then you go on to replacement of dwellings outside the settlement boundaries, but there's nothing, doesn't seem to be anything about replacement of dwellings inside settlement boundaries. And then right down at the bottom you have 8.27, which talks about replacement dwellings. So it just needs a bit of tidying up, I think. Have we got, so I would have thought that we would have a policy on replacement dwellings inside boundaries.
Isn't that what the first part of the policies
That's subdivision.
referring?
Well, that's only about subdivision.
I mean, within settlement boundaries, the principle of replacement would be acceptable anyway. So I'm not sure that we necessarily need further policy coverage, but I'm going to hand
Then
over
at
to Mr. Dickens, who I think was doing the housing chapter.
8.27 says this policy supports so it's headed replacement dwellings, but it talks about annexes, extensions, alterations, and outbuildings. So I just
I think that's talking about HN07 on the next page, Jess. Which is
I thought we did the policy first, and then the justification underneath.
I think that's just an introductory line. I'm going on the fact that the
Policies are the bit boxes.
yeah. So Jess is saying 8.27 as it is.
Oh,
Because
yes,
it's out
you've
of
got a heading
context
that says
floating
replacement
elsewhere.
dwellings, which is in the wrong place, isn't there?
So I'm not quite sure how it should be, but I'm thinking it's not
it
quite
needs
like this.
it needs some tidying up
Yeah,
and
that's all.
representation just to make sure that it's not ambiguous. That's fine, but I think 8.27 is supposed to go with policy HN07 on the following page. Given that 8.27 says household or annexes, extensions, alterations, and outbuildings, and that's the title of HN07 on the next page. So officers can take that one away and look at
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you. Any other issues in chapter 9, please? No? Okay, thank you, members. We come then to chapter 10, which, for the benefit of people who have notes with policy numbers, is policies that begin DS. Any comments here? Chapter 10 starts on page 153 of the appendix, not of the agenda pack. High quality design, indeed. No? Okay. Any comments then on chapter 11, Sustainable Transport and Communications, which starts on page 161? No? Okay. Chapter 12 then, Our Outstanding Landscape. And Mr. Dickens, you're on notice. We will go through the green wedges in a moment, please, which I believe are in this chapter. No? Okay. In which case then, Mr. Dickens, can you take us on a tour of East Devon's proposed green wedges? And then we will move on to the next chapter, if there are no issues. Alphabetically, I don't know.
What order have you got it in?
I haven't. I've got a map. They're all over the place. Go west to east. Shout which one you want. Exmouth, Glimston.
Okay, so that's the Limpston plus, where's that to the north? Exton, one to the north, and then Exmouth Limpston to the south. Matt, can you just move the map south slightly, please, just so we can see it on the edge of Exmouth? Thank you. So that's the green wedge between Limpston and Exmouth.
And that's the green wedges.
Yes, the green wedge is in like turquoisey kind of colour.
The white that is south. The land that is south of that green wedge, which is in white, all of that, or a lot of that, is in National Trust ownership, and that's protected in some way. But I did wonder why that wasn't included in the green wedge. But
Because we adopted the green wedges from the last plan and it wasn't then.
yeah, but it's also you haven't got the coastal protection area on there as well, have you?
You only asked for the green wedge.
Yeah. So yeah, so you can, that's a lot clearer now.
I'm not convinced it is. Okay. Are there any other green wedges that folks want to see?
Cliff St Mary, please.
Cliff St Mary, please, Matt. Take us on a tour of East Devon.
So what are you doing, just looking at them, or are you going to discuss them?
Nothing really to
Well,
discuss.
Jeff hasn't raised any issues, nor has anybody else with the one that we've just seen. So, Councillor Ingham. Can we go back to?
Previously agreed.
It's a good point, actually. Yes, we have previously agreed these based on the maps that came on the 22nd.
So then we're not going to be actually, there's no point in discussing any of them.
Well, there's a point in making sure that officers have done what we asked them to with any amendments, I suppose.
Yes, I think the purpose of the exercise was to show you this is the fundamentals of an interactive map, which will form the proposals map for the local plan and part of the consultation. So just see how we've plotted them on the system, really, and check that it aligns with your understanding as to what was agreed. But this follows the resolution. This follows the resolutions the committee have previously made with regards
Yes,
to
but we
green
had no
wedges.
choice, did we, really? Because I know Councillor Young and myself have said that extending the green wedge would be appropriate up along north of Hullam Road. You can see that straight line that goes from the corner of the Exmouth green wedge up towards the common. Yeah, we've said that for a number of years, but you know, you've always politely totally ignored that. And Jeff's point is that the National Trust land, we know that there are powers that be that have a mind for us to develop on there, because there was, do you remember meetings with Network Rail, who told us, well, we're going to put in an extra station there because they want to develop there. So, you know, it's all very well saying that there is a coastal protection or preservation area that covers that, but we need to do belt and braces, in my opinion. And here's another opportunity to make sure that that's what happens. But I realise that not all the officers on this council want that to happen, as you can see by the allocations on that map.
Sorry, Councillor Ingham, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you just say all of the officers in this authority want to see that area of white land that Councillor Young was speaking about a minute ago developed?
No, what I'm saying is we know that through Network Rail's announcements it was a meeting here, that they wanted to, for example, put in a station between Exmouth and Limpston, basically. And why would you want to do that unless there was a mind to develop immediately adjacent to that? and they were saying it's just a matter of time before that happens. Now, if it's our will to protect the interests of the people of Exmouth, then we would extend that green wedge and say, well, we know that's owned by the National Trust, but we know how important that land designation is to the community of Exmouth. Perhaps we should extend that green wedge. But I don't think officers of this council, or some of them, the key ones who will take this decision, are interested in doing that. And in the same way as they haven't listened to Councillor Young, who's, like myself, thinks that the Exmouth Limpston Green Wedge should be extended up just north of Holland Road up towards the Pebblebed Heaths, you know, or maybe a Sangs area, absolutely against a blank brick wall, you know. So I don't see that there's any point discussing this, because there's no mind to listen to what local representatives are saying.
You're welcome to make a proposal if you like, Councillor Ingham.
I propose, Chair, that we extend the green wedge down south from the line of Summer Lane, but down to the estuary, down towards Exmouth, so that the land that's currently in the ownership of the National Trust will become a green wedge, and also that land east of that green wedge follows the line up along Hullam Road towards the Pebblebed Heath, that wedge up there, so that we don't have the same predicament over the next 10 years that everyone's been worried about. And then has it been exacerbated by what we've done within that green wedge already?
Okay, so I'm going to do three things. One, I will look for a seconder. Councillor Young, do you wish to say anything? Your microphone, Ben, please.
I'd love to see more protection in the areas that Councillor Ingham is suggesting. Also, we did discuss the playing field on Courtlands, which is in the bright green. I presume that is designated as a playing field. Yes. And now I wonder if it could be green wedge and playing field. But I know there's a lot of protection on a playing field anyway. So
I did say that, Chair, last time.
Mr. Freeman, can you take off the playing field designation? I think we'll probably see that it is also green wedge. We definitely said it should be, so we can amend that. That's fine. That's easy. Okay, we have a proposal then on the table. I'm going to Mr. Hunter to ask if it's, again, are we revisiting a decision there?
Yes.
By seeking to amend the boundary of the green wedge. Is your name Mr. Hunter, Councillor Bailey?
No, I just wanted to say that we've been told, advised, not to do this. And now
Yes, yeah, and what happened earlier is that you made a proposal, Councillor Fernie seconded it, and then I sought legal advice. So I'm being consistent and doing exactly that. Mr. Hunter, please. Okay, Mr. Freeman is going to keep checking that. Members, on the assumption that the motion has been validly made, I've got to say I don't think either of those two areas should be green wedge. I don't think they're preventing coalescence between Lympstone and Exmouth. I think if we did that, we're undermining the entire policy and putting at risk not only that specific green wedge, but all of our green wedges, quite frankly, if we take that step. But that's my view. Councillor Young?
I would agree with you with the North Holland Road sections, because it's not segregated. There's not a community the other side of Holland Road until you hit Woodbury, which is miles away. But with the coastal bit, which is the National Trust sort of triangle, I would say that is coalescence.
I will not be supporting this because we haven't had any papers about it, and we sat here all day, and there's hardly any committee members left. I know we're still quorate, but I really don't like doing something really radical and different on the hoof, so I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Howe?
Like Councillor Bailey, I won't be supporting it for the reason that this hasn't been to consultation. I know it will as part of Regulation 19, but at the same time, I think it's just a bit ridiculous. Added to the fact it's National Trust land. You know, are we really saying National Trust is going to become one of the biggest developers in the area? You know, I think you need to be really careful about what you're hoping for and everything else. Added to the fact you can't call that coalescence with that land. You just can't.
Okay, Mr. Freeman doesn't think this decision has actually been before us, so the proposal is validly made and constitutional. So the only person who hasn't spoken to it then is Councillor Fernley. Do you wish to speak before I take us to a vote? No? Okay, in which case then all in favour of the proposal by Councillor Ingham, seconded by Councillor Young, to extend the green wedge to the green wedge between Lympstone and Exmouth to the northeast along Holland Road and to the south into the area bounded currently by the green wedge, the estuary and the settlement boundary of Exmouth. All those in favour of that proposal, please. That's 2. All those against? That's 4. So the proposal falls. Thank you very much, members. Are there any other comments on... actually, are there any other green wedges that folks would like to see before we move to Reg 19? Before we move on?
Excellent, please, which is just further up the estuary.
That's down the estuary, Matt.
I went up and down.
We're going to have a collection at the end of the meeting for a compass for Mr. Dickens. Sorry, Matt. So those are the green wedges around Exton. I think Mike wanted to see.
I'm not fussed with it.
Clissa, you know you don't. Okay, cool. Anybody else? Anything else pressing that folks want to see?
Did we have Baltimore? Has that still got one? Did that go?
I don't think Baltimore. Does Baltimore have a green wedge, Mr. Dickens?
Yeah.
Can we see?
As previously resolved, we've carried over the green wedges from the previous local plan. So apart from the allocations that have subsequently been made.
There you go. There's Baltimore and the Cliffs Valley Regional Park.
We'll go and drop down a bit for Cliffs and Mary for me then.
This must be fascinating viewing on YouTube.
No. That's fine. Exactly as it used to be.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you. Any other comments on chapter 12?
And I think the West Hill Lottery one is the same as it is as bar the exclusion. Thank you.
Okay, in which case then chapter 13, outstanding biodiversity and geodiversity. Councillor Bailey.
Sorry, it's policy, it's on page 187, I think, and it's about the grade of agricultural land and development on agricultural land. I'm just trying to get it up. I think that, again, a bit like with the policy on local shops and facilities, I'm concerned that we're actually weakening it in comparison with our current local plan, because our current local plan has a policy that uses the word exceptional, and that seems to have been deleted from this draft local plan. And I think that we should make it either the same or
OL.
better.
Oh, 11.
Is it OL 11? No, I can't even find
Development
it.
sites.
Sorry, I'm just trying to scan through. So I don't know if you've got it up there, but oh, thank you. So I think in our current local plan, it refers to in exceptional circumstances, and I just think it's generally a bit weaker than it is in our current local plan, and I'd prefer to see it as strong as our existing one, if not better. Please.
So just reading the existing policy off Mr. Freeman's screen, I think the difference is that the word exceptionally appears in that first sentence after the word granted, but otherwise I think it's identical, that sentence, pretty much. Yeah, it is. So we can add the word exceptionally after the word granted, that's fine.
Thank you.
Any further comments on 12? Councillor Faithful? Can you email it, please, if it's a typo, just so we don't get bogged down? Okay, chapter 13 then, outstanding biodiversity and geodiversity. Which for anyone tracking policy numbers is policies beginning PB. Okay, chapter 14 then, open space and sports and recreation, which is policies starting OS. Chapter 15, outstanding historic environment, policies starting HE. Chapter 16, community facilities, policies starting SF. Oh, sorry, CF, if I can read. And then anything at all on chapters 17 or 18, which are implementation and monitoring and glossary of terms, or on either of the appendices, which are hopefully relatively uncontroversial. No, okay, I hear no comments on those then. So having been through the whole plan then, I will move from the chair recommendations 1 through 3 as, and recommendation 1 as amended by Mr. Freeman. So can we go to, we cannot go to HDMI 2 currently unless we pass the cable down. Plug it back in. Councillor Ingham?
Is it not possible to take each recommendation one at a time?
We can do each of them one at a time, yeah. I was just going to propose them together. So I will propose recommendation 1 as it is shown on the screen there, and then I believe recommendations 2 and 3 are unchanged.
That's correct.
Okay, I will propose those 3 then from the chair, and Councillor Ingham has requested we take those individually. So we'll start then with recommendation 1 as shown on the screen. All those in favour, please. That's 5. Those against? That's 1, and there will be no abstentions then because that's everyone. So that is carried. Recommendation 2. All those in favour, please. That's 5. Those against? That's 1, and no abstentions then. And recommendation 3. All those in favour, please. That's unanimously carried. Okay, thank you very much, members. That brings us to the end of the 4 and 5 we did earlier as part of chapter 5 because they were on specific sites. Okay, thank you very much then, members. That is everything. We have or will have soon the Regulation 19 version of the plan. We'll keep you updated on the timeline for that. And that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. No meeting on Friday. We'll discuss that in a minute. This meeting is closed.